We'll call the meeting to order. All right, this is the, is this thing working? There we are. I just have to get good and close. Okay. This is the March 24th, 2021 regular session of the Schertz Planning and Zoning Commission. We've had the call to order. Alternates are not required this evening. Item 3, hearing of residents. Anybody? Anybody send anything? Nobody. All right. Item number 4, the consent agenda. Let's see, I think we have 4 items on the consent agenda this evening. Item A are the minutes from March 10th, 2021 regular meeting. Item B is PC 2021-007, consider and act upon a request for approval of a final plat of the Parklands 2 Subdivision Unit 1, an approximately 23-acre tract of land located approximately 3,500 feet east of the intersection between Parklands Way and Frobese Lane, City of Schertz, Guadalupe County, Texas. Item C, PC 2021-008, consider and act upon a request for approval of a final plat for Unit 7A of the Homestead Subdivision, an approximate 27-acre tract of land generally located approximately 380 feet east of the intersection of Crockett Cove and Winkler Trail, City of Schertz, Guadalupe County, Texas. And item D, PC 2021-009, consider and act upon a request for approval of a final plat for Unit 10 of the Homestead Subdivision, an approximately 14-acre tract of land generally located approximately 1,100 feet east of the intersection of Crockett Cove and Winkler Trail, City of Schertz, Guadalupe County, Texas. Commissioners, anything need to be pulled for discussion? All right. Commissioner Greenwald has requested that we pull items B, C, and D. All right. So, based on that, our consent agenda then is just down to item A, minutes for the March 10th, 2021 regular meeting. I have a motion.
Motion we approve the minutes for March 10th as presented.
I have a motion of commotion. Can't talk tonight. A motion to approve the single consent agenda item from Commissioner Greenwald. Do I have a second?
Second.
From Commissioner Platt. Call for the vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. 7 ayes, none opposed. That passes. All right, so we'll go back to item 4B, PC 2021-007. Consider and act upon a request for approval of a final plat of the Parklands 2 Subdivision Unit 1, an approximately 23-acre tract of land located approximately 3,500 feet east of the intersection between Parklands Way and Frobese Lane, City of Schertz, Guadalupe County, Texas.
You're good. You're good. Okay, so do you want me to go through it all? Okay. So just to get your bearings, this is Parklands 2, Unit 1, located here in the green. The property is going to be serviced by the City of Schertz Water and Sewer. The property is going to be a 72 single-family residential lot. Here's the second page of the final plat as well. The engineering, public works, fire, and planning department have reviewed this plat to be in accordance with all UDC and PDD requirements. And at this time, staff recommends approval for the Parklands 2 Unit 1.
All right, thank you. Commissioners?
When did these Actually, all three of these subdivisions become part of Guadalupe County.
When
Did you hear the question?
When did they become part of Guadalupe?
I guess the question is, you think they're in Comal County or
No,
no?
you're in Bear County.
Oh, no, sir. These are up north. Parklands and Homestead are up north off of 35.
I know it's hard to see.
Yeah, it's hard to see, but 35 is more towards the north. This is, the subdivision over here is Cypress Point, and then the start of Parklands, the original Parklands is there. So it is all in, and we can pull up you want me to pull up the city map so you can,
I'm just questioning why, are they in Guadalupe County?
all three of these are in Guadalupe County.
Okay, as long as you say so. Take your word for it.
Commissioners, any other questions or comments? Do we have a motion on item B?
Make a motion, we approve item B as presented.
We have a motion to approve from Commissioner Greenwald. Do I have a second?
Second.
And a second from Commissioner Ray. Any further discussion or questions? Call the vote.
Aye.
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 And aye. 7-4, none opposed, motion passes. Item C, PC 2021-008, consider and act upon a request for approval of a final plat for Unit 7A of the Homestead subdivision, an approximate 27-acre tract of land generally located approximately 380 feet east of the intersection of Crockett Cove and Winkler Trail, City of Schertz, Guadalupe County, Texas. Any discussion?
Yes, sir, I have a question. Are you gonna go first? I don't think we need to, but.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Megan.
No, I mean, if there's a specific question, I mean, we
Yeah,
can,
Archer Pass, as it crosses that ravine down there, do we know what they plan on building? And my concern is it going to be something that's going to flood and become a high water crossing? Or is it something that's going to be above what we think might be a flood level?
we actually have Badad. He is actually one of the engineers on the project. So Badad, do you want to speak to that? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Badad Zaruni. I'm a project manager on the Homestead subdivision with Milan Wheeler Engineers. That crossing designed as a culvert crossing. We have sized the drainage area that drains to that location, submitted to City of Schertz Engineering Department and reviewed a hydrology map with calculating, doing all the engineering required to calculate a flow that comes to that point, and the culverts are sized as such to handle that. So it is not a flooded drive. It's designed as all-weather access.
Okay. I hope the calculations are good. All right, thank you.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
There are no guarantees. Mother Nature will do what Mother Nature does, so
That's it.
we can only try. Any other questions, comments?
And then the related to this one, the portion of Schwab Road on the plat, the developer will construct that portion, but not the portion that goes to 35. Right? Okay. I see a head nod in the back. All right, thank you.
Motion?
Anytime, unless we have further discussion or questions.
Motion, we approve EC 2021-008 as presented with the answers to the questions from Mr. Bro.
I have a motion to approve from Commissioner Greenwald. Second?
Second.
Commissioner Haynes, any further questions or discussion? Call the vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 7 ayes, none opposed, motion passes. Item D, PC 2021-009, consider and act upon a request for approval of a final plat for Unit 10 of the Homestead subdivision, an approximate 14-acre tract of land generally located approximately 1,100 feet east of the intersection of Crockett Cove and Winkler Trail, City of Schertz, Guadalupe County, Texas.
Are there any specific questions or?
If no one has any questions, we'll entertain a motion. Okay, I have a motion to approve. Commissioner Greenwald, do I have a second?
I'll second.
And a second from Commissioner Ray. Any further discussion? Call the vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. 7 ayes, none opposed. The motion passes. Item number 5, workshop and discussion. Item A, Commissioner requested workshop and discussion on homeowners associations in relation to City of Schertz regulations. You want to start this, Emily?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
I'm excited.
all right.
Okay, so just as some background of kind of why this workshop discussion is being held, at the March 10th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, Commissioner Platt did request a briefing and discussion on homeowners associations in relation to City of Schertz regulations. At that meeting, a letter was provided by Mr. Platt that the City of Schertz's planning staff has looked over. We've looked over the references, so I'll go into those references that were put on that letter. And we did discuss it with Dan Santee from Denton Navarro, Rocha, Burnell, and Zach, which is here, in case there's questions on the legal side. The biggest thing is currently the City of Schertz only ensures the following really in relation to HOAs. All open space, common areas, green belts, drainage easements, or other areas identified as private shall be the responsibility of the owner or owner successors and or assigns, provided such successor or assign is approved by the city. That is a note that is on every plat that we bring before you guys. We make sure that that is on there. All that really does is ensure that any area that they're keeping private, the City of Schertz is not responsible to maintain. So if it's a private drainage, City of Schertz Public Works isn't expected to go out there and, you know, do the maintenance, that kind of thing. So in the letter that was provided, there were some references, and I'll go through these kind of quickly. There was a reference to 21-12-3, a pre-application conference. That is we call it a pre-development meeting. It's optional that we offer all projects, developments, applications, whether it's from a zoning to a site plan, we offer those, but they are completely voluntary. We do not require them from any project that gets submitted. The master development plan checklist, it does not require the zoning checklist to be submitted as part of that. Typically, when we're seeing a master development plan be submitted, the zoning's already in place. The zoning checklist, specifically item number 17, it states any information required requested by this application, city staff, city codes and ordinances, and state statute. Basically, it's kind of that catch-all. If there's something else that we need provided to us, we have the ability to request that as part of the zoning application, but it does not reference the submittal of HOA documents as part of the zoning applications. That's not something we request or review. The next one, 21-12-6. The subdivision master plan process, it does reference that a subdivision master plan is required to provide for review of certain developments for compliance with the comprehensive land plan, the UDC, any additional adopted plans, but again, within that, HOAs aren't referenced. The Schertz comprehensive land plan, specifically page 8.3 of that document, does reference homeowners associations, but in the manner of the City of Schertz, we should work with all of the various groups, not just homeowners associations, but businesses, the Chamber of Commerce, all of that to ensure that the look and feel of the city is really cohesive and one that's unique, but it doesn't reference reviewing the HOA documents. And then the Schertz sector plan, kind of similar, it mentions management associations as something that if city council deemed appropriate, you know, from the Schertz sector plan, it might be something to be reviewed, but nowhere else in the sector plan it discusses homeowners associations or what we would actually consider off of those. We did do a full review of the UDC as well to see where homeowners associations were referenced in our code, and they all basically relate to the same thing. It's all back to that maintenance. So maintenance of streets and gated communities, maintenance of private parks, maintenance of private streets, basically ensuring that the city of Schertz is not responsible for maintenance of items that are still considered private. And then the legal standing, so Texas Property Code, Chapter 202, reserves to a property owners association or other representative designated by an owner of real property the right to initiate, defend, or intervene in litigation or an administrative proceeding affecting the enforcement of a restrictive covenant or the protection, preservation, or operation of the property covered by the dedicatory instrument. Again, in Texas Property Code, Chapter 201 provides population bracketed statutory provisions for restricted covenants. Unfortunately, none of those apply to the city of Schertz. So in Texas Property Code, we do not have the ability essentially to regulate those like some other larger communities, mainly I think Dan was saying like Houston meets that population and they would be able to. So deed restrictions are restricted covenants that create a contractual agreement between and among the property owners of a subdivision, and each owner has the right to enforce the contractual terms of that instrument. So it's really between the property owner, not really, you know, it doesn't come into the city, if that makes sense. Again, the city of Schertz may not expend public funds to enforce the private contractual terms created by restrictive covenants within a private subdivision. It is truly a private document. At the city of Schertz, we do not request those. We do not review the HOA documents. The only time we look at the HOAs is to ensure that we're not being held liable for the maintenance of private items. So that's all I have on the staff side.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Platt, I think this was your request. If you'd like, go ahead and start it.
Well, the issue was raised originally from some members of the community up near where I live. And essentially what's in place with the HOA documents and restrictive covenants is they are tied into the development period in such a way so that those HOAs never get turned over to the residents of those communities in any way. And they remain in the purview of the business and run as such. My idea was to be able to at least review those beforehand in some way. Obviously, you're saying we're not capable of doing that, but you know, this in particular are things that these residents had never even seen before and was not made available to them beforehand.
I think the basic question, and we probably know the answer, but the question is, you know, and even Savannah Square, where I live, did not have an HOA when I bought the house. We've since organized a voluntary HOA with no enforcement authority. But I can dig out my purchase documents, and I find deed restrictions or covenants or whatever you want to call them. And I was aware that those kinds of things existed when I bought that house, and I even asked for them, and then like a dummy signed the paperwork with it without ever having received them. I got them from the closing company, from the escrow company when we closed. But I think when I read Commissioner Platt's letter, what he was really driving at, does the city have any control at all over how an HOA is organized or the time limits or anything like that?
So it's my understanding that we do not.
Okay.
And kind of goes hand in hand, you know, it's my understanding a lot of the HOAs get turned over at a certain point when so much of the development's been built out. We don't have the right or the ability to say, well, you have to have the whole development done by X date. You know, if
Yeah, I think that's what surprised me about Commissioner Platt's request is the HOAs that I'm familiar with would typically at some point during the development would, as lots are sold and homes are sold and people move in, as that population expands, at some point, the developer himself, his authority over the HOA kind of diminishes in some kind of a, but in this particular case, that's not the fact. It's a straight, you know, that subdivision can be 100% sold and you have 100% of the houses built, but the developer retains control of the HOA for 50 years. That's what kind of caught me off guard. So I think it's another one of these, and I want to be careful what I say here because I don't really mean to offend a whole bunch of people. But I'm not sure about the whole disclosure thing, and you know, it's probably outside the authority of the city, but it just seems like we've had the same issue where we try to get the developers and the builders south of Randolph to tell the buyers that the base is there and that you're going to hear jet noises. And we even tried to, I think the city even tried to get a bill passed through the legislature to require that, and it was, it never went anywhere. And unfortunately, I think that's kind of the boat we're in here now, where the city really has no authority over it. It's really buyer beware. And I know that's not the answer you wanted to hear, but is that kind of a good summary of it, Dan? Yeah. So.
Well, I'm even okay with that, and it's a buyer's due diligence. However, at the same time, I don't think people and our residents should be caught off guard when seems like we should have a way, even just to require them to submit that for review as part of the process. Not that we'll take that into determination of whether we approve it, but in this scenario in particular, that HOA is directly tied into the development period. The development period is part of that process of the development that we do approve.
But even so, like for instance, most of the MDPs, like the Homestead MDP says, they're projecting to have, you know, the last unit done by, you know, X year. We do not hold them to that. If the economy tanks or, you know, who knows what, and they can't finish the whole Homestead subdivision, that date is just a date on the MDP exhibit. It's not something we're, you know, legally binding them to. We don't have the ability to say, by this time you have to have all of your final plats done. Mm-hmm. So if it takes longer, so I mean, I'll kind of look to Dan and Brian, but to me, if we have no ability to regulate or enforce those HOA documents, I don't know why we would want to, you know, take them in and act like we're going to review them when we really don't have the ability to say, you know, no HOA, like developer at this date you have to turn the HOA over. We don't have the ability to do that. No,
and I understand that's not what the intention is or what I'm implying at all. And I believe that the HOAs are very important and will protect communities in many different ways in the future, and most of them do. But what is to really stop an HOA from implementing a plan such as this tied to their development and then doing whatever they want during that development phase and period? I don't want to limit them on the development phase or the timeline or anything of that nature, but
well, they're held, you know, an HOA can't just, we approve plats, we approve master plans and PDDs, and they can't just arbitrarily change that.
Yeah, maybe I'm not clear on what, and I apologize, maybe it's not clear to me what you're actually asking for or trying to get
I think the implication was, Brian, that if they were submitted as part of the development package, if you will, then they become part of the city record and might be more accessible, or, you know, but, and I agree. You know,
I think the issue is in order, it wouldn't really be more accessible. I mean, you know, the issue that we've had, that we've talked about before, is this is a private transaction between somebody buying a house. And again, I've done that before, and, you know, at some point you sit there and go, nope, you need to set aside all day for this because I'm going to read every document. Otherwise, you go in and they flip sheets and you sign, they flip sheets and you sign, and you're going to get into. So I think that's the fundamental issue. I think from the city's perspective, a couple things. If the city tends to take it in, there's an expectation that we have some control and review over it, and we don't, so we don't want to get that false perception. The other is kind of this issue of, if it's not a factor, we don't have a regulation, then let's not open ourselves up to the criticism that somehow we made a decision based on something we liked or didn't like. I certainly don't disagree. It's something that probably you and your neighbors ought to get together, you know, work to better inform people buying, hey, check your HOA docs. You can certainly reach out to your state legislature, who restricts what we can and can't do, and lobby them for what you need. I mean, there are certainly pathways for y'all to go going forward, but the city is kind of, we do what we do, we don't do what we don't do, and this is one that, you know, again, and this has been an issue, I will say this, for the 23 years I've been doing this, every community I've worked in, this comes up, and it's kind of the same answer. You know, if buyers said, nope, you know, I'm not going to buy in a neighborhood that you control it for 50 years, then a developer gets the message and changes what they put in the HOA docs. That's fundamentally it. So I don't mean to be not empathetic. I certainly am and appreciate this, and I've had a lot of conversations. But it really is this private transaction that when people say, hey, I don't want government telling me what to do and being all in my business, this is what they mean. And I mean this in kind of up until it creates a problem for them, and then they kind of say, hey, government, why weren't you here? And that's the problem, is the state's restricted us. People don't want us kind of involved in those transactions, and we don't provide a good solution.
Didn't the state legislature a couple of years ago put something in the rules that requires either the salesman or the salesperson is required to notify him that there is a homeowner?
It's in your seller's disclosure that you're required to sign. You have to disclose whether or not it's part of an HOA and there's dues involved. You have to list how much the dues are. So, I mean, yeah, buyers should know that when they purchase the property.
Well, the problem is that 90% of the buyers don't know it.
Well, it's on a disclosure sheet. I've seen the sheet, and it's grown to 2 pages long, and they have to initial it and all that stuff. And I do think the legislature passed that bill that said you have to notify people that there's an air base in the area, because I've seen that too. Whether the homeowner reads it or not, that's a whole other issue. But it's on the disclosure list, and it has to be read. It has to be signed. I wanted to ask Commissioner Platt, does the developer down there, does the developer maintain majority governorship of the board? Or is there a board of directors for the HOA?
So just from my knowledge of this particular HOA, it's a 3-person board controlled completely by the developer until the 10th anniversary, at which point it's a 2/3 control of the developer until the end of the development period. So, but again, there's other things in there that kind of limit the vote of that 1/3 that's from the community elected. But
so the developer maintains majority
in perpetuity. And it even goes into those documents saying that it goes on and renews every 10 years, for 10 years, until the last surviving heir of the developer passes away. So
buyer beware.
So I guess the other question, and really outside of the personal implications of this, is what would happen if a developer pulls out? If we've approved a plan and they pull out, now these responsibilities under the agreement are turned over to the homeowners or a new developer or something along those lines. What do we do as a commission or as a board at that point moving forward?
You don't have a role in that. You still don't have a role in that. This is the Planning and Zoning Commission. This is not like a super HOA. We don't enforce any of those restrictive covenants. We don't enforce any of those things. So you can decide matters of zoning. And, you know, the city just doesn't have a role in any of those private contractual matters between private homeowners.
There was a question, at least that came up in my mind, where the HOAs are responsible for the common areas and the private streets. And of course, the private, we're talking about the gated communities where we're talking about private streets. But to take the question, and this is really just curiosity more than anything else, and not the developer, but what if the HOA goes bankrupt and can no longer, they don't keep up the private streets and they don't keep up the parks, and what happens then?
Once. And so in a gated community where that scenario occurred, and what the city told them was, if your streets are brought up to the same level as the other city streets and pass an inspection and you can dedicate them to the public, they would accept them. But that only dealt with, the streets themselves. For gated communities, the one exception to what a city will enforce is only for police, and it's in the transportation code. And so on a petition of 20% of the owners of property within a gated subdivision or the HOA, a city can extend police protection into that gated community for an agreed upon fee if they so desire. But that's kind of the opposite of what this other whole discussion is about, right? That's taking the laws that are applicable on public streets,
right,
and by agreement applying them to private streets,
right?
And it's limited to.
Yeah, I remember that. We unless they asked and the city approved, you couldn't write speeding tickets. You couldn't run. You couldn't write running stops. So you couldn't enforce the traffic code within the.
You can only respond to calls for service.
Yes, right. But I guess what I was really asking was, because we make the caveat on all the plats that the common areas are the responsibility of the HOA to maintain. And my question was really, what's the city's recourse if they don't or they can't? Okay, and I guess it's probably some kind of legal.
Well, I believe we have a section somewhere, either in another part of the laws or something, where the city has said that they have to maintain, and the city has a right to audit a sufficient reserve to cover whatever these costs that are projected for that HOA. Is that not correct?
Not sure. You're talking about in the UTC that says that? It's not in state law, so if you're saying the city has something in the UDC that says that they require?
Well, I don't know that it's in the UDC, but
okay. Well,
it was.
They have to maintain the drainage, the drainage within the subdivisions. If it's gated, they have to maintain the streets, the common areas, but I don't know if they maintain the parks. Those are dedicated to the city.
If it's a private park, then the HOA or whoever takes over that development would be responsible. I'm not personally familiar with us having a reserve, but I think it would just be like any other property owner. If they're not maintaining or they're not, maintaining their drainage easement or something like that, I would assume code enforcement could go out and.
Well, you will find the reserve issue addressed under Carolina crossings.
Well, let me.
You're talking about those if the association has no money. The association collects their money from the homeowner, mandatory dues. And if one homeowner doesn't like the way this homeowner is maintaining their property, then they have recourse against that homeowner.
Yeah. It was,
I don't know that that is a scenario that is
okay,
here in Schertz.
yeah, I don't think it has. And I apologize, I drug us off course there, and I apologize for that, thank you.
Right, well, but to answer your question, though, a lot of those answers are in the property code because they empower all of those different homeowners to take action if that happens. It still doesn't mean the city has a role in trying to fix that problem. At the end of the day, once the dust has settled amongst that infighting, they can come to the city, I would assume, if they no longer wanted to maintain common areas, but the city's not obligated to do
Yeah.
anything in that situation.
Okay, all right, thank you, Dan. Again, I apologize. Commissioners, anything else on this topic?
No, I'll just say that the summary that you gave a moment ago and what he was talking about is a very good summary from back in the 80s. We went through this exact same subject. We even had a member of the commission that went as far as to address it with state legislatures, trying to get something put forward. And we're still sitting today with the same rules and responses and so forth as we were in the 80s.
I want to try to clear something up, because I think we kind of got a little off topic, and there may be some confusion as to what actually the point of this from my perspective was. I have no desire to get involved in private business between a resident and an HOA at all. That's off the table. If a developer comes in and submits a plan that the city doesn't like, what's the city going to do? They're going to deny it. Why wouldn't the city want to see what that entire plan is if this developer is going to build 1,100 houses or 800 houses and retain control of those forever? Why wouldn't the city want to make sure that that developer has a good plan in place to take care of their residents, or even review it? That's really what the question comes down to. And we kind of got more into the personal interactions and buying houses, but on a more global scale and not a personal level. And that's what I read from all of these references that you had in there, that there are management association provisions in there to be reviewed, to work with and make sure that the best interest of the residents are included and taken into account during all the phases with the developers.
I think it also boils down to the same point, though, that the city has no ability to enforce, regulate, require them to change any of those HOA documents. So if they want to contain, hold ownership forever, the city has no ability to tell them, no, you can't do that. You have to turn the HOA over. We legally don't have the ability to do that.
And if we approved it, where does our liability come in? If we look at it and approve it, and is there no liability back on the board or anything?
Man, there's some deep weeds here, guys. None of y'all are stamping any plans, right? None of y'all are engineers. None of y'all have stamped anything. When they present a plat to you with that stamp on it that their engineers have stamped, they're telling you that it complies with your regulations. If they are wrong, you won't be a party to that lawsuit. You don't have liability for that. And no one here is going to tell the engineer that they're wrong on the plat. I mean, It's a ministerial function. If that plat is filed and it's final and it meets all of the regulations, it will be approved. And if they're wrong on their assumptions that they've put their stamp on, that won't be your responsibility to correct or answer to.
I'm glad to hear that. I used to rely on that a lot as the fire marshal, so. Yeah, because before Dan got up there, I was going to say, well, you know, there's a lot of people that, you know, our engineering department looks at things, you know, the professionals, the folks that know, and they tell us it's okay. So, for lack of a better term, I think we act in good faith based on the input that's given to us. But you look a little frustrated over there, like maybe we're not. You know what I'm thinking here is the way this one particular HOA, there is nothing that keeps. When we approve a master plan or a PDD or zoning, we can hold their, you know, staff takes great care to ensure that that's the way things are done. Now, when you look at the HOA itself, the organization and the rules and all that kind of stuff, there is nothing to keep. You know, you bought your house and here were the HOA rules. There's nothing to keep the HOA from changing those rules. I mean, see, and that's danger is the wrong word, but that's one of the things I see in this long-term developer involvement is he can, you know, if he's got, you know, there's only, you know, he's got 2/3 of the votes, he can change things, not the development plan. He can change the HOA structure, but he can't do anything to change the development plans without city approval, if that's any of your concern. So, right? Yeah. Are we good? Anybody else? I don't want to cut it off if you know, because, you know, yeah. Staff's always available for one-on-one. I love to make you folks work, don't I? Okay. All right. Item B, a workshop discussion and possible action regarding the Planning and Zoning Commission bylaws. Oops.
All right. So at February 10th, the Planning and Zoning Commission, Commissioner Haynes requested staff to take a look at the currently adopted Planning and Zoning Commission bylaws. He caught that there was an error on the meeting dates, so we did take a look at those. They were included in the packet, 19R 142. That's when they were adopted by City Council in 2019. And it did say that y'all met on the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays of the month. So the only proposed amendment is just to clear that up, to change it to state meetings shall generally be held on the 2nd and 4th Wednesdays of the month, and the meetings will be canceled if there are no items to be considered. That is the only change that's being proposed by staff. It's literally just Tuesday to Wednesday. That's it. And it is listed as workshop discussion, so we can talk about it, and then we can take an action. The action would be a recommendation to City Council from you guys. And then if there are other changes, we can talk about those as well. They're just wouldn't be presented tonight as part of the proposed plans.
Okay, thank you. Eagle Eye, that's your item. You want to talk about it?
Thank you.
No problem. I don't know how we all missed it in 2019. It's kind of funny.
It's just a minor little detail, but it is our bylaws, so I figured we got to clear it up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the risk of cut and paste. Okay, so because you know who does meet the 2nd and 4th, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't know.
You want to take any action on this, commissioners? If that's what we choose to do, yes, sir. Are you making a motion?
I will make the motion
Okay, I have a motion from Commissioner Greenwald to recommend the changes shown here to City Council. Do I have a second?
A second.
Okay, from Commissioner Platt. Any further discussion? Call the vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. 7 ayes, none opposed, the motion passes. Item 6, requests and announcements. Request by commissioners to place items on future planning and zoning agenda. Do we have anything? Hearing none. Item B, announcements by commissioners. Anyone have anything they want to share with the group?
I don't know if we'll be getting copies of it, but council last night made a lot of changes to some of the building laws and the fire prevention and you name it. One of the biggies was we don't have to have somebody out surveying a house subdivision or where we lost all those houses up in North Cliff. And everybody made the change to require an engineer be there when they poured. Being deleted.
Oh, my understanding was it's being cut back to where they're not requiring quite as much paperwork. But yes, what Commissioner Greenwald is talking about is the city is in the process of adopting the 2018 International Code Series, both building, fire, and that. And sitting on Building and Standards Commission, I've heard that presentation 3 times. If you're interested, you can watch last night's council video and get the rundown from. That's where both the fire chief presented his and amendments and things to the fire code, and then the building official. They all went through the new building, plumbing, electrical. So if you have any interest, that's a good way to see that. Thank you, Ken. Anybody else? All right, staff. Nada, huh?
Baby still kicking?
All right, commissioners, well, that concludes the agenda for this evening.
I'll bring it up since Greenwald brought it up.
Okay.
If y'all haven't noticed, I'm about 6 months pregnant. You haven't noticed, so I guess that's an announcement. There you go, Mr. Greenwald. And yes, he's been moving the whole time.
Oh, congratulations. So, okay. All right. There being no further business, this meeting's adjourned.